Here we are in the Rotunda, in the park, in Yakandanda, in beautiful northeast Victoria, with Cathy McGowan. Cathy, welcome.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for being with us, taking your Sunday afternoon. And you just pointed out that you were weighed and measured at the maternal health centre across the road from the park here.
I was. So Yakandanda...
Recently, or when you were a baby?
So Yakandanda is my home community.
Yeah.
My mum and dad had a dairy farm about 10 k's in the westerly direction, and mum would come down with us kids, and just across the road, the Maternal and Child Health Centre. Yes, we all got weighed and measured, and as the family grew, we would come and play here because they could lock the gates, and mum would take the little babies across to be measured.
Oh, how brilliant.
Yeah, and we go to church at the Catholic church here, and on Sundays my dad would give us threepence, or it could be sixpence, to go down to the lolly shop and buy lollies, which was just the highlight of our lives.
Absolutely. And Yak, did it look much different to what it is now?
Oh yes, it did. Now it was a very, I would say, sad, washed out community when we were growing up. Beraggled is perhaps a word, but there were a lot of dairy farmers around, and it was a poor community. And then it went through serious times in the 60s and 70s when the dairy industry just basically died around here. And it has since reinvented itself. So there's very little agriculturist as such now, and it's really picked itself up. It's got an art society, it's got community choir, it's got a huge cultural life, and a very active school, and senior citizen centres behind it, so there's a lot to do. But yeah, it's really reinvented itself now.
Is that the future of a lot of rural and regional Australia? That towns that are no longer seen as agriculturally economically viable, yet are experiencing a rebirth just by the people who are coming to live there and bringing new ideas and new lifestyles, perhaps? Certainly
in northeast Victoria, we've got the beautiful climate. It's a lovely place to live. But I always do get sad that agriculture dies because we want good food. So I'm hoping the future will be a reinvented agriculture, small scale, very productive horticulture, and providing local food to local people rather than mass commodity agriculture. And we haven't quite got there yet, but there is a huge amount of interest in regional food policy around northeast Victoria. So I'm hoping that that's the way we go. Like, we've got the water, we've got really fertile land. What we don't have is people being taught, or schools don't teach, but that is changing agriculture.
I read somewhere recently where Australia is considered the most risk-averse of the developed countries. Does that stifle our creativity in areas such as agriculture?
Well, it wouldn't be my experience of ag. Before I was a member of Parliament, I was involved in agriculture, and I would not agree with that. The farmers that I know are not so much, not that they're risk-averse, but they're entrepreneurial. And certainly around here, and if you go a bit further west, the agriculture that's taking place is just fantastic. And young people are returning to farms.
Yeah.
I've got a colleague and friend. He went to school in Albury-Wodonga, went to Melbourne, did engineering, worked with a very large multinational company that does really big engineering work. And he's going, no, I'm going home. So he's now doing his Masters in Ag at Melbourne University, and he'll come back home on the farm. And there's a lot of young people coming home. So they're very excited by the opportunity.
That's exciting with the horticultural opportunities that you were talking about. What about the controversial? There's a good word. Let's market that. Now what about the controversial traditional farmings such as cotton and rice?
Yeah.
What's going to happen there?
Well, I can't speak for those because we don't really have those around here.
No.
But we do have. So this young man is coming home to a wheat, canola, triticale and sheep farm. So that's pretty traditional. Around northeast Victoria, southern New South Wales, that's mostly what the large-scale cropping farms are, and many still have sheep. So that's what he's going to come and work in. Oh, and it makes money. and many of the farmers, even though it's very dry at the moment and we're going through a dry period, many of the farmers are saying it's a golden age for agriculture. The price of lambs is very high.
Yes,
The
yes.
price of meat, beef is very high. So, and farmers are really innovative in how they've adapted to lower rainfall. I think we had the Millennium Drought, which really taught farmers, they learned a lot from that about how to farm with a whole lot less rainfall. And even though it's quite tough now and people haven't got as much rainfall, there's still enormous agriculture going on, food being produced, and farmers really able to produce on low rainfall, and that's matched by some of the research and development that's happening. One of the farms I visited recently, they've got a new variety of wheat where it's multifunctional wheat. In the first half of the season, the sheep go in and eat the wheat, eat the grass, eat the wheat. Well and truly have a really good feed out of it, and then the sheep get taken off, and the wheat grows again as grain wheat. So. And it uses even less water than they used to use in the past. So, there's enormous change and development happening, and it's really quite exciting to be part of.
Yes, innovation by necessity and innovation driven by the urge to go that one step further and, I guess balance. How do you get how do farmers now get the balance between what's required economically and what's required lifestyle and environmentally? And there are so many factors in farming involved now. I often wonder how they can do all the juggling. They need to be sort of super people in their knowledge of world markets and what's going to trend and what comes next.
Well, so maybe I could take you out to a couple of the farmers that I know around here who are doing that. They just love the challenge. So it's just like somebody who's got a job in a professional job in the city. They're balancing international markets, they're balancing currency, they're balancing traffic, family life. So it's the same type of challenges that farmers face, and they're clever. And they've got many of them have a really long history in community and farming. They've learnt to be adaptive, and they live in communities.
Yes.
So they learn from each other.
Yes.
So it has a bit of a bad rap, I have to say. And as the drought's progressing, there's a huge sense that farmers are all doing it really badly. And it's not to say that there's definitely pain and suffering out there, but not everybody's suffering. And certainly in this area of northeast Victoria, there's huge amount of we've had rain. On my farm, I've got sheep, I've got grass, and sure, we're heading for a very dry summer, but we know it's coming. So people are prepared for it. We're conserving our water. We're making sure we've got enough feed for our animals over summer. So we're managing for it.
Go now to Papua New Guinea, where you've just recently visited, and you did a lot of work pre-Parliament over there with women in agriculture. What were you talking about with those people up there this time?
So very specifically, when I was a Member of Parliament, there was a number of groups in my electorate who clearly lobbied me really hard to represent them in Canberra. And one of the groups was Rural Australians for Refugees. And there are 9 separate groups of Rural Australians for Refugees, and there's a network in northeast Victoria. And they were hugely effective lobbying me to do more around the Australian treatment of asylum seekers and particularly offshore detention. And I took the issue very seriously when I was a Member of Parliament, but I didn't have much success in changing the government's perspective. So I made a commitment to these groups that one of the first things I would do when I was no longer a Member of Parliament, I would go to Papua New Guinea, I'd go and visit Manus, I'd talk to the people in PNG, and I would work with Rural Australians for Refugees to see if we could convince our government to take up, if not bring them to Australia, then would they send them to New Zealand. So I went to Manus, and while I was there, I was really pleased and surprised that the new Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Mr Marabi, he had come to Australia just a few weeks before, and he told the Australians that basically the people in Papua New Guinea want it finished. They're over being the dumping ground for our problem. And while I was there, the last of the refugees or asylum seekers moved out of Manus, which almost had no coverage in Australia, but it was a huge achievement from the Papua New Guineans. Like, that had nothing to do with us. But anyhow, the PNG moved, the government, now the leftover asylum seekers are in Port Moresby. and that's better than being in Manus, I think, but it's still not very good. There's a group of people who are actually in the jail. The Australian government's built a special wing of the jail. So there's about 53 people there, and there's asylum seekers among 3 other hotels. And there's the mixture of people waiting to go to the United States. And then we've written letters to the Minister for Home Affairs asking him, well, what will happen to the people who can't go to the US that are currently in Port Moresby? And Mr Dutton says, well, they've got to stay in Papua New Guinea. Now, the problem with that as a solution is that the Papua New Guineans don't want these people there. They're mostly Muslims, and Papua New Guinea is a Christian country, and Papua New Guinea is a very strong tribal community. Like, there's 600 different languages, and people's Wontok, their family groups, are really strong. Yeah. So asking people from Africa or Afghanistan or some other part of the world to come and settle in Papua New Guinea is not a good thing. But the other thing that Papua New Guineans told me was that they've already got enough of their own problems with asylum seekers. Because if you know your geography, just next door to Papua New Guinea is Irian Jaya.
Yes.
And there's incredible disruption happening there.
Yes.
So lots of people from Irian Jaya are actually going to seek asylum in Papua New Guinea. And that's put great strain on that country. So they really want Australia to sort this out. So it's not just the government, but I also caught up with the church groups while I was up there. And the Secretary General of the Bishops' Council for Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands has been very strong in his advocacy to the Papua New Guinean government to liaise with Australia to sort this out, because it's moved past any degree of moral right. They see for what it is. It's imprisonment, and they don't want it. So there's a community movement in Papua New Guinea to get Australia to change their mind. So I suppose I'm working with Rural Australians for Refugees now to see if we can convince our government that if they won't bring them to Australia, could they please accept the New Zealand offer. And 150 people to New Zealand seems to me a win-win for everybody.
Talk about the Chinese influence. The snippets of news I hear about Papua New Guinea is mostly involves the perceived threat of a strong relationship between the Papua New Guineans and the Chinese.
Well, yeah. So there's a few things happening. Papua New Guinea is a sovereign nation, and they're big kids. You know, they've been farming and growing food and living in their country for a very long time. They don't like being patronised by Australia, and we patronise them. We mine minerals there and bring them to Australia. We send our unwanted problems there, and I don't think we treat them with the respect that they deserve, and they feel that. The Papua New Guineans have a great love for Australia. They associate with Australia. They watch our TV. Many of their children come to school here. And ever since the Second World War, they've had a really, great fondness. They feel like we're brother and sister. Yeah. So they want to be treated better. So if I put that there, at the same time, China is doing a massive explosion of investment in the Pacific, because China gets that Papua New Guinea's got resources, thank you very much. So yeah, there's Port Moresby has I've been going up there for a good 10 years, but in the last 2 years it's really changed. When I was up there last month, there were cranes everywhere. I stayed at the Hilton Hotel, 15-storey, brand new, really modern, really beautiful hotel. And the cranes have all got Chinese writing on them. And at the base you see accommodation, and it's Chinese workers working doing all the construction work. So clearly China is investing in enormous amounts of infrastructure in Port Moresby. And it seems to me that if we don't get our soft politics right with Papua New Guinea, and China's doing a much better job with their soft politics, well, it would make great sense then for the Papua New Guineans to turn north if they're not being treated with respect, and I think more than respect, like they want a bit of love. And I don't think they're getting the love that they feel that they would like.
Yeah. Moving back to Australia, now May 18th, the election, an independent, Helen Haynes, and I'm going to allude to your final speech in Parliament, in just and that fabulous quote at the end in just a few moments' time. What do you think, though, happened that day?
So I think three things happened, John. I think on a personal level for me, the community gave validity to the idea of an independent. And it wasn't just a Cathy thing, or it wasn't just an anti-Liberal thing. It was a positive vote in favour of an independent. I think that happened. The second thing that happened is the Liberals in particular, but the National Party also, had run a really strong campaign. And they had what we call, invested or promised, pork-barreled, huge amounts of money into Indi, and it didn't work. The people here get that having a marginal seat's important, and they weren't sucked in to the cargo cult of we'll give you stuff if you vote for us. And the third thing that happened is that not only was Helen Haynes elected, but Zali Segel in Sydney was elected as well.
Yeah.
So we've now got two really strong independent women in Parliament, and together with Rebecca Sharkey, Andrew Wilkie and Adam Band, who's a Green, there's a very strong crossbench. And so that's held. And I'm really pleased for the nation that the major parties now have to work with the crossbench and pay attention to them. Because I think if the crossbench had been disbanded, if the Indi had not won, if Tony Abbott had won his seat, that would have been a really different parliament to what we've got now. So I was really quite excited by that outcome. That not only did the people of Indi continue to vote, like 32,000 people in Indi gave their first preference to Helen, which is just huge. And the Liberal Party, the old traditional tactics that they used didn't work. And third, Parliament held on to a very strong crossbench, which is a moral. That crossbench have got great morals and courage and tenacity. And I think they speak for a very large percentage of Australians.
Yeah, interesting. Just on that point of recently, this week, there's been talk of Scott Morrison introducing laws to, effectively ban the protests of environmental groups outside the corporations of businesses, outside the buildings of businesses that are dealing with mining industry, for instance. Sorry, I'll just brush that aside. What's your thoughts on that, and will it go any further?
Look, I'm not across. I did read about it. He has to get it through the Senate, and I think that'll be a bit of a battle. He's got to win the hearts and minds of those senators, and I don't think that will easily be done. But also within his own party, that whole idea of freedom for speech is a really strong Liberal tradition. And when I was in Parliament, there was a lot of debate about that section 18C, and there was division within the Liberal Party about that. So he's got a lot of work to do, I think, to convince his colleagues, let alone the Parliament, that will value add to the country.
Where are we going in the next couple of years, do you think, in Australia? Just randomly select an area and away we go. Where's Australia heading?
Well, I'm really excited, John, that in my community, which is northeast Victoria, that we are walking the talk of being the change that we want to see, and it's working. So let me just talk about that. I can't speak for the whole of Australia, but just for this community that I know. When I was growing up, we were a traditional agricultural community. We were quite a backwater. We were under-resourced with infrastructure, with mobile phones, with internet, with public transport. And that has changed. And it's changed because a group of people decided they wanted something better for themselves. And then they worked collaboratively across the community to create a want in the community, a want in we could do this. And then it worked. So not only in the first instance did I get elected by 39 votes, which was a bit of a surprise, but then we won the next election in 2016 with a much greater majority, and then in 2019 Helen won clearly. Now that's just not a mistake. It's a clear decision by the community. But where we're going is it's not just the representation that's changed, it's the whole community changes. So for example, in this little town of Yakandanda, there's a group called Totally Renewable Yakandanda, and they've got organised to say, well, we want to do something about renewable energy. Yeah. And the annual general meeting held last week to set up a community retailer, that we can buy and sell our own energy. We don't have to be dependent on the really big companies to do it.
Yeah.
That this Rural Australians for Refugees have taken on, from little northeast Victoria, have taken on changing the government policy about offshore detention. That there's been some fantastic community-based work around mental health. So the community's saying, well, we're not going to wait for the government anymore. We want to work with government, but we'll be the change we want to see. We'll put our hands up, we'll work together, we'll build coalitions, and we'll really work with our local government and our state government to make this community better. So I don't know if that's happening in the rest of Australia, but certainly in this neck of the woods. And I was just talking to some locals, some people from Melbourne here, and they're saying, oh, we're thinking of moving up here. It's the sort of community that we want to live in.
Yes.
And I'm going, yeah, come on in.
Yeah.
You know, bring your kids, bring your skills.
Yeah.
Much better lifestyle.
Yeah. You can feel that, can't you? You can feel that groundswell. I just wanted to get to this quote, which completed your final speech in Parliament. What an incredible day that was, too.
Yeah. Were you there, John?
No.
Oh.
I saw all the pictures.
So it was my final speech in Parliament on the 4th of April.
Yes.
And it was, we'd all been preparing for it, so the speech was organised, and busloads of people from northeast Victoria came, and they were all wearing orange, and they filled the whole Parliament up. And I was there with some of my colleagues sitting in the House, and I said my opening words were welcome, and everybody stood up and they gave me a standing ovation. And I have to say, to be a member of Parliament for a rural community for 6 years and to leave with a standing ovation from your community, I thought, thank you, team.
There was so much orange. It reminded me of the Bhagwan era, you know, in the 1980s, the orange people.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's got a sense of that
Baba
too.
Muktananda.
Yeah. But it was...
you could feel, you could just feel the atmosphere was pulsating from those photos.
It was. And the colleagues could see it as well, because they look at me and the parliamentary colleagues, and they go, well, you know, we know Cathy, you know, she's good value and, you know, she's done a good job, but how does she get busloads of people to come up for a final speech?
Yeah.
What is actually going on there? Is it, you know, what's in the water? What's actually changing? And it truly, I think it's a vindication of our participatory way of working and that commitment to actually get people involved. And what I loved, there were so many young people there.
Yeah.
Oh, there were teenagers, there were families, there were all sorts of... it was a really great cross-section of the community. It
finishes with, the future is not some place we are going to, but one we are creating. The paths to it are not found but made, and the making of these pathways change both the maker and the destination. That's so powerful. Where does when you're making your next pathways, where's it, are you diving a la Julie Bishop into some highly paid consultancy within the next couple of days, or what can you let us in on there?
There's a few things. I'm thinking of my time at the moment as more like being on long service leave. I haven't quite worked out what I'm going to do next, but certainly the themes that governed my time in Parliament will stay with me. So support for the refugees will certainly continue. My real interest in renewable energy and support for Yakandanda and the whole community it's doing there. I'm also really interested in tertiary education. One of the consequences of being a backwater was that there's a very low participation in higher education in northeast Victoria, because it's really expensive to get to university. You have to leave home, and it's hard. So I'm very keen to work with both La Trobe University and CSU in Albury-Wodonga to see if we can do a much better job at making it easier for not only young people but people who want to retrain to get to university, and TAFE clearly as well, and have that pathway. So that's always been a passion, and I'll stay involved with that. So that's sort of in the short term where I'm going. I haven't worked out much further than that.
But that's a great goal to be in the short term.
Yeah.
To have in the short term.
Oh, and my other one is Aboriginal recognition.
Yes.
I have got a really strong commitment to see constitutional change in this area, and I want to better understand what happened in northeast Victoria at White Settlement. If you go across to Shepparton, which is our next door community, there's a very strong Aboriginal presence. There's not a very strong Aboriginal presence in northeast Victoria.
No.
And one of the reasons, to me, it seems that people died. And I'm wanting to better understand, well, what happened at White Settlement and what happened to the traditional owners and to welcome. I'm sure they've gone. I'm sure they're not all dead. They're probably in Melbourne. They might be at Lake Tyers. They might be in Albury.
Would the impact of gold have had something to do with that? Because perhaps gold was less prevalent in the Shepparton area, and the extent and the impact of the gold rush here was huge.
It was. Yeah, I'm sure. So we don't know. And when you go to school locally, you get we don't have any local history.
No.
So I've got a real interest in the longer term of being involved in better understanding white settlement, better understanding and welcoming our traditional owners, finding them and welcoming them into what we're going to create in the future, that change we're going to make for the future, and making sure that we get the constitutional change we need for Aboriginal people. That's a really important, but I think a longer term goal.
Yep, definitely. Looking back now, has your lifestyle changed much since leaving Parliament? I mean, how many coffees were you on a day down there? I remember you used to have afternoon teas and things, and the amount of tea and coffee you'd have to get through in a day would be staggering, wouldn't it? As in Parliament, and then those late night sittings, and then travelling from here up to Canberra, incredible.
Yeah, it was big. So
are you going to miss it?
I haven't let it go. Like I still listen to Parliament, and I still regularly in touch with Helen Haynes and Rebecca Sharkey. So I follow the politics of it.
Yeah.
So I'm not leaving it go. I'm really pleased that I could hand the responsibility over to Helen, because I carried the weight of being the representative. It was very heavy, and wanting to do the best I could for my community. So and Helen's up for it. Helen's a fantastic member of Parliament, and she's loved. So she has accepted that responsibility. So I don't have to carry that anymore. So that feels really good. And my job now is to be in the community and support the community group so that they can work with their elected representative better. So yes, I'm loving not being micromanaged in terms of my time, and I'm really loving being able to go shopping, which into the Akandanda supermarket, and having time for conversations.
Yes.
Because I used to always be in a hurry because I had something else on I had to do. I don't miss that bit of it at all.
Yeah, great. All right, thanks for being with us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon with a bit of rain around. We've got a gift. John Kovacs, our producer, director, mentor, always puts together a beautiful gift for our guests. And this one is, of course, gift wrapped from the House of John. And
so it's the day after Halloween, so we've got some chocolate. We've got some local oranges, which will be beautifully appreciated. And are they lollies?
Yeah. John's family grows these oranges and limonades.
Wow, isn't that great?
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
And can I say?
I know it's an orange.
Can I say thank you, John Walker? Because I haven't really said that one of the things that are most wonderful about living in Northeast Victoria is the arts. Our community arts life is so rich and so varied, and I know that you're a really big part of that. Not only being an actor, but teaching and encouraging our young people to be involved in theatre and music and drama and all the arts. And Northeast Victoria just thrives because we've got such a wonderful community art scene. So thank you for your bit in all of that.
Oh, absolute pleasure, Cathy, and thank you for all that you've done to support those arts over the years. I can remember going and having very vociferous debates with you in all sorts of places in the 1980s.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the year and your career.
Thank you, John.